Good afternoon. As it is 1 p.m., I will call this City Council workshop of September 25th, 2024 to order. This will be both a physical meeting and a virtual meeting. Some members of city staff or consultants may be participating via teleconference. Today's meeting may be viewed on YouTube, Facebook, and following the meeting, on cable channel 10 HD 1090. Public comment is not normally taken at workshop meetings, although the council may allow or request public participation on action items. We have no action items on our agenda today. First, I would like to welcome all and a warm welcome to our distinguished guests. We have various members of tribal affiliations with us this afternoon, and here to introduce those to all of us is our city archaeologist, Gideon Kaufman.
Thanks, Mayor. Gideon Kaufman, City of Oak Harbor. Right now, it's been reduced a little bit, so we have Josephine or JoJo Jefferson from Swinomish Indian Tribal Community. You want to say anything, or I can hand you the microphone?
Sure.
All right. You could just talk. I think it's ready to go. Or talk into the mic.
And good evening. Thank you again for Gideon putting this together so that we can, we speaking as Swinomish, to get affiliated with the City of Oak Harbor. I strongly believe that, I don't know if I introduced myself again. I'm Josephine Jefferson from the Swinomish tribe. I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. And thank you for inviting us and the ones that are on satellite. But I go back to, I strongly believe that the connections, the relationships between Swinomish and the City of Oak Harbor needs to be established. And I think this is a good first step of having continuous meetings that we're setting up so we can still be connected to the City of Oak Harbor. I think there's several ways to we can connect and make that the friendship aware to the City of Oak Harbor, the community. I think there needs to be more awareness and of Native art of who we are. And we do have, Swinomish does have a piece of land in town from Pioneer Parkway. And I think from there, we should have continued to have a relationship, but I know it takes a while. So I think this is a good first step to, for us to start a new chapter and having new people sitting on Senate and sitting in, higher roles, that we'll be able to start a healthier relationship. So I just want to say thank you for inviting us, and to Gideon for all the hard work that he does, because I know what he does because I do it for our tribe. So, thank you.
Thank you, JoJo, for the kind words. Other tribes that were here, we had Samish Nation, so Jackie Ferry, who's the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and Nicole, whose last name slips Smith. Oh, yeah, Nicole Smith, who's their executive administrator, as well. And it was a nice, positive meeting over at Public Works and showing them the properties in the rain. So toughing that out, and overall it was wonderful. And as JoJo had mentioned, I'll probably be doing some visits to some of the other tribes who weren't here today, and of course visiting Swinomish, and continuing our relationship with tribes.
Gideon, thank you very much for all your hard work on putting this together. JoJo, thank you again. It was a pleasure to meet you today. Look forward to working with you on a continued basis going forward. Thank you so much for making the trip and enduring the weather with the rest of us. So All right, with that, we are going to move into executive session at this time. The council will move into executive session per RCW 4230-110, parent 1B, to consider lease or purchase of real property as penalties to price, or as pertains to price, and per RCW 4230-110, parent 1F, to receive and evaluate complaints or charges brought against a public officer or employee. The anticipated duration of the executive session is 15 minutes. Action may or may not be taken upon return to the open session. Executive sessions are not open to the public. If additional time is needed, the city clerk, Julie Nestor, will announce any extensions.
The council has announced that they will extend the executive session for an additional 15 minutes. Thank you.
What are you doing?
All right, at this time, we have come out of executive session and are resuming the regular session of the workshop. There will be no action taken at this time. We are going to move on with, staff has requested that we switch the order of the two engineering presentations. Okay, so we have two presentations, and it's a little bit different than what was on the agenda. They just switched the order in which they're going to be presenting those. So just to make sure there's no confusion there, the first one will be our comprehensive safety action plan update. And here to present will be the city engineer, Alex Warner, as well as Washington State Safety Lead, Veronica Sullivan of DKS Associates.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Yes, I'm Alex Warner, your city engineer, and I've been working with the DKS consulting team for 5 months or so on this. It's a Safe Streets for All grant-funded project and a joint effort led by the Island Regional Transportation Planning Organization. It's been a lot of good work so far, and for an update, we've got our Washington State Safety Lead, Veronica Sullivan.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, great. This is even better. Okay. Excellent. All right. So as Alex had mentioned, we are working with IRTPO, the Island Regional Transportation Organization. Every 2 weeks, we meet with Island Transit, Town of Coupeville, City of Langley, City of Oak Harbor, and then other stakeholders, part of IRTPO in Island County. Okay. Our partners are with Tool Design as our subconsultant, and I am the project manager as well. Great. Thank you. So why are we here today? Well, we're talking about fatal and serious injuries. Fatals are crashes that occur and result into a death, and serious injuries are ones where you have to end up going to the hospital due to a laceration or a broken arm or broken bones. And if you look at this graph, it looks at all the crashes between 2012 to 2022 in the past 10 years. And you can see that the number of fatals and serious injuries are not decreasing. They're either rising or they're staying relatively the same. Overall, we've seen this trend ever since the pandemic. The number of fatal and serious injuries have been increasing. A lot of this is due to a number of issues, such as speeding, impaired driving. We've seen that there's a lot of different contributing circumstances that are having this trend. Next slide. Oh, that's me. Sorry, I forgot. All right.
You can see it in front of you now.
Oh, fantastic. Great. All right. So what is our vision? What is our goal? So our goal as a region, we are committed to the goal to reduce the number of traffic deaths and serious injuries to zero by the year 2045. We chose 2045 because it also aligns with a lot of the comprehensive plans that are occurring in other jurisdictions. And why are we doing this? Because every life counts. We want to get to that zero traffic deaths and serious injuries by that year. And we have to have some sort of target goal in mind. We don't want it to be the year 3000. We want it to be sooner rather than later. So what is a comprehensive safety action plan? Well, it's one way we can actually try to put it into paper, not just goals. So our plan is to enhance public safety across all modes of transportation for all users and all abilities. We try to identify risk factors, look at locations, look at targets for the future, and the purpose really is to reduce the number of traffic deaths and serious injuries. And we're trying to make it a more environment for everyone, all users and abilities. So as Alex had mentioned before, the funding source is already paid for. It's the Safe Streets and Roads for All funding. It happens once every year. The notice for funding happens in February, but there's also HSIP, which is the Highway Safety Improvement Program that starts in February as well. So the plan for this is that we have a draft by December and January so that we're lined up to apply for these projects in February or for SS4A in May. That is the plan. We're trying to identify as many projects as we can so that we can take advantage of these grant opportunities. Just as a quick refresher, WashDOT does have 5 different classifications of crash severities. We're really focusing on fatal and serious injuries because those are the most significant types of crashes. But there's 3 other types. There's suspected minor injury, possible injury, and PDO, which are ones that you hit a pole, but no one was injured. And here is just for city of Oak Harbor. I showed the number of crashes countywide, but I wanted to show specifically for the city of Oak Harbor between 2018 and 2022. The next couple of slides will be showing the crash statistics. As you can see, the number of crashes in totality has been between 150 to 230. Overall, the trends remains the same. There have been fatalities almost once per year, but the relative amount is that majority of crashes are no apparent injury. I want to take some time talking about this slide. This is just comparing City of Oak Harbor in the first 3 columns per year by the last 3 columns in gray, which are countywide, all over Island County. All over Island County, there's about over 3,000 crashes, but in Oak Harbor itself, there's about 988 between 2018 and 2023. When we did a crash analysis, 2023 wasn't perfectly confirmed about location, so we just have it between 2018 and 2022. Yes, go ahead.
Can you define what's considered a crash? I mean, if I have a fender bender in a parking lot, is that a crash?
Correct, that's
Okay.
right. Anything in, the thing with crashes that majority of WashDOT crashes are involving a vehicle. A vehicle hits a pedestrian, a vehicle hits a bicyclist, a vehicle hits a pole. Those are all crashes. The ones that are very underreported are when a bicycle or pedestrian's involved. A bicycle hits a pole, most of the time they go straight to the hospital. They don't have time to go call an officer. An officer attends the scene. If they call, they will create a report and they will determine what the severity is. If the person goes to the hospital 30 days later, within those 30 days, and if they die in the hospital, it ends up being a fatality. So that's what determines between a serious injury and a fatality. Any other questions? No? Okay. So let's figure out what's happening. Why are these occurring? So if we look at the 988 crashes, 3 of them were fatal, and 20 were serious injury. And I know these are numbers on a chart, but I want you to think about it. These are people. These are our residents. These are our citizens that every life matters, so I don't want to see another 3 in 5 years. We want to see 0. We want to see 0 by 2045. If we could see 0 next year, that'd be fantastic. But we have to figure out how to get there. So if we look at the trends, we can see that a majority do occur on the highway. A lot of them are occurring on intersections. 556, which is almost half, or more than half, is intersection related. Impaired driving, distracted driving, and lane departure, all very significantly high. And I just want to point that out, that if we can look at educational campaigns, we can figure out what are our law enforcement doing, what's our fire department doing, what's our emergency services doing, what are the other departments to really take this as more of a system and a holistic approach, rather than just as traffic engineers, what can we put on the road? Okay. Any questions about this? Veronica? Yes.
If I could just kind of maybe follow up on, with a good question by Councilmember Stuckey, if 2 people have an accident in a private parking lot, that data is not shown here, right? There's no report, there's no knowledge of it. Just to be clear, because I think that was a very good question. So these are where there's a report generated with law enforcement or with the hospitals.
Correct.
Which, is that the way you would say it?
That is correct. So fatalities, if there's a fatality in a parking lot, that's 100% included. So what WashDOT tries to do is they look at fatalities very, very closely. It's difficult to determine when a report is, someone had a heart attack in a car, but if it happened in a car, then yes, they will have a police officer will show up. But let's say you're going to the hospital in the parking lot, you're on the way, and you get out of your car and they don't call the police, that's technically not a traffic accident. Thank you. Okay. Great. All right, and then there's another option on the traffic report that the police officer can fill out. It's called the contributing circumstance. So rather than the cause, it's like what other factors are involved in the crash. The first one is the top 10. So the highest contributing circumstance is did not grant right-of-way to vehicle. That is a whole host of terms. It could be like you're turning right and someone is turning left and you happen to hit along the road, someone going through a driveway, and another oncoming vehicle. That can also be did not grant right-of-way to vehicle. And in some cases, a side swipe. Sometimes that can also be another way. There's following too closely, rear ends, very, very common. No apparent injury is the majority of those types of crashes. But I do want to keep attention to that under the influence of alcohol is top 5. That's pretty high in Oak Harbor. I think that's something that we could possibly do something with regards to education. There's free transit in Island County, so I think that's another thing that we can really promote as well. Okay. So we mapped all of the crashes all through Island County, and then we mapped it specifically for Oak Harbor. Oak Harbor, you can see that is the boundary of the city, and there are some blue lines outside. We are looking at this county-wide, so I just want to keep focus of Island County itself. The majority is occurring on the Highway 20. However, there is a couple of minor streets and arterials that we do want to highlight on Whidbey Island, Whidbey Ave, Crosby, and other ones as well there. We just want to let you know that these streets here we are looking at in our analysis. But this is more of a reactive. We're looking at crashes that occurred in the past. Now we are looking at where crashes occur in the future, and how do we do that? Well, we developed something called a Safe Systems Network. A lot of other consultants call it the high-risk network, but in this particular case, to avoid tort liability, we're going to be calling it the Safe Systems Network. And in this case, we're looking at what could the potential new areas of concern be. We're looking at traffic volumes, we're looking at functional classifications, the existing speed limits, the roadway setting, and equity. Equity is a big factor when it comes to the safe systems approach, and we want to look at certain areas in the entire county of where equity needs are. So this is, if you compare them, I'm going to go swap back and forth. Before, there are some existing corridors that are identified on the high injury network, but we've also identified some corridors on the Safe Systems Network that we want to keep a track of and look in the future for potential new projects. So what have we done so far? Well, Oak Harbor, we've actually done quite a number of public events. We've done some in City of Langley, Town of Coupeville, some farmers markets, and we recently did the National Night Out. Alex had joined me, which was fantastic. A lot of other contributors. And here's some comments. There are a lot of sidewalk requests and additional parking, wider shoulders. A significant one was reducing chip seal for cyclists. A lot of bicycle advocacy groups were requesting reducing chip seal and using actual asphalt. And then adding some push buttons as well in some existing intersections. But we also have a website too. We've developed this interactive comment map that is online right now. We've been trying to promote it as much as we can. It's a great, you can zoom in, add your own comment, add a photo. The website, you can translate it into 10 different languages, and it also has a survey. We've had 21 survey responses so far, and we're really trying to promote the website as well. Yes, so if anyone's here, we're welcome to take a survey. We are looking at some areas of concern, and we have a multitude of different outreach events. We have our own public meeting at 4:30 to 6:30 at the center of Oak Harbor, and then we have quite a number of others in Langley and the city of Langley and the town of Coupeville as well. So just for the schedule update, just for the last slide, I wanted to share with you that we are currently in the public outreach and crash data analysis phase. We're drafting the CSAP for December and January, and then we're hoping to provide you with that draft so that we can finalize and approve the CSAP by 2025 in spring. Any questions at all? Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. First, could we get a copy of this PowerPoint?
We're working on it right now.
Okay.
We're printing it right now.
I would, love to get that in my email. Thank you. And going back to your top 5 list, or I guess the whole list, there were like 3 or 4 different distracted categories. Can you give me some examples or tell us why that's not all the same, considered the same factor? Yeah.
Oh, the contributing circumstance?
Yeah, unknown distractions, other, or inattention, like what's the difference between those things?
Okay, that's a very good question. When the police officer looks at the crash report, it's quite a number of pages, and when you're at a crash scene, there's a lot of things that you need to check off. So when you're given that, you're given the sheet has a number of check boxes, and they tend to check box a number of things. And if something is odd, they can usually check other contributing circumstances not listed. And it's unfortunate because Washoe doesn't have a standard police crash report. So if something is happening in one city versus the county, it might be slightly different. This is a big problem with city of Seattle versus city of Pasco. We've been doing comprehensive safety action plans all through Washington. And it's becoming a slight problem, but I haven't seen the crash report and what they do here in the city of Oak Harbor. I'd like to see that, if that's possible.
So
Police chief has his hand up.
Chief Slowik has a comment.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this.
Fantastic.
First, I was a traffic officer for many years, and traffic accidents are near and dear to my heart here. So, there is a standard accident report for the entire state. It's through sector. It is a state patrol managed process. The questions are all standardized. All officers in the state of Washington go through the same training on how to fill out the report and how that report is collected. I'm not sure where all the data comes from in this information, but we're going to meet later and find that information out. There is options for officers to mark different contributing factors. Sometimes it could be more than one, and often there might be a couple things, because you could have distracted driving and exceeding the speed limit, or you could have not staying in your lane and something else. So there could be several contributing factors. However, if there's not a witness, or the person that is involved in the accident is either unconscious or doesn't tell us the truth, the officer might put down other, because they haven't been able to determine what the cause was. So that's the gist of it. But I don't know is, since you can mark down multiple things, is it based off of each accident and only one incident's pulled for each accident?
Yeah,
Is it?
weighted.
Yeah, I'm unsure of that. The other part is, if you're sampling from the hospital, often accidents don't get all reported to law enforcement. People might report things at the hospital that was not reported, or there could be double reporting because if a case number wasn't brought forward. So I'm just curious about that information as well.
Yes, that's a very good point. In WashDOT, they actually have 3 different columns, one for each. Each row is a crash, and it has about 258 different columns about the different attributes. Now, for contributing circumstance, there are 3 separate contributing circumstance, and then for each of the vehicles or people involved. In this case, you're seeing the top first one that's included. It's really up to the officer what they checked first, and that's what WashDOT takes what they can. This is all WashDOT available data. The reason why we do that is we're comparing against the WashDOT Target Zero plan, which is the state-owned plan. They use the exact same data. We just want to be able to compare apples to apples.
Gotcha. So when there's multiple factors and the officer checks one, it's up to them to decide what was
what's the most important.
Like, yeah, what did they think was the worst thing, and then what was contributing.
Correct.
And okay, God, yeah, it really kind of highlights the difficulty in quantifying all of this
Correct.
data. So very interesting. Thank you.
Of course.
So this morning you presented at the county on this topic.
Correct.
And the second item when you presented at the county was speed.
Correct. So
For Oak
county,
Harbor.
For county-wide, number 2 was the exceeding reasonable safe speed.
Got it. Okay.
But for City of Oak Harbor, since the audience today is City of Oak Harbor,
Yeah.
I wanted to create a custom data set for
Perfect.
this one.
Yeah, just making sure that there was, the differentiation there. So
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Any other questions from council? All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Oh, thank you so much.
Mikhail just handed out the packet, the presentation, so you all have it.
So next, we have State Route 20 Fakima Road Roundabout update. Introducing that is our city engineer, Alex Warner, as well as the project and representatives of the Washington State Department of Transportation.
Thanks again, Mayor and council members. Here's an exciting project that we've been in communication with WashDOT on for a couple of years now. I believe you presented to council about a year and a half ago at the early stages of this intersection improvement project. And for all the details, we have Chris Demetrio, our Assistant Regional Administrator, and Adam Emerson is the project engineer for this one. So take it away, guys.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Well, good afternoon, and my name is Chris Demetrio, and I'm the Assistant Regional Administrator for the Department of Transportation for here in Island County. We're excited today to share with you some upcoming work we have just north of Oak Harbor on SR 20 at Fakima Road. Too often, when needs are brought forward to me, especially on roads here in Island County, my response is sadly that it doesn't prioritize well when you look at other needs statewide. In the case of Fakima, a safety need's been identified, and we've determined that we can apply some low-cost enhancements here to improve safety. Low-cost enhancements allow us to address even more locations statewide that may otherwise go uncorrected. So with me today is Adam Emerson. He's our project engineer who will explain what is happening at Fakima Road. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, Council. Thanks for having me today. As Chris said, my name is Adam Emerson. I'm the design project engineer who is overseeing the development of this intersection improvements project. I'm hoping today to provide an overview of the project as well as a little bit more information about why we're doing the project and how we're going to be accomplishing it going forward. So before I dive too deep into the project itself, I just like to make sure everybody's oriented to the same spot in space. Folks here are probably well familiar with the intersection of SR 20 and Fakima, but in its current configuration, it's a T intersection where the north and southbound traffic on 20 is free flow, no controls on it, and Fakima is stop sign controlled. The kind of unique thing about this particular intersection is it's actually the convergence of 4 different jurisdictions. So we've got Island County to the northeast, Oak Harbor to the southeast, the feds by way of the Navy to the west, and then WashDOT, who owns the right-of-way in between. So pretty fun area to do a project in, actually. So what are we doing? Well, the intent of this project is to construct a compact roundabout. And compact roundabouts are something that you're probably going to, or are starting to see a lot more prevalently on the state highway system. They are a hybrid between a mini roundabout and a full-size traditional roundabout. So we get the benefits of the roundabout type of intersection control without some of the drawbacks of a traditional full-size where it requires a lot of land and their environmental impacts, et cetera. So just for a sense of scale, a mini roundabout is kind of is low volume, low speed urban areas. The driving circle that you're in is about 60 feet in diameter. A full-size roundabout, like what you'd see at Banta Road, is meant for high volumes, high speeds, and it's about 120 feet. And so what we're proposing here is something right in the middle at about 90 feet. And so the 2 roundabouts that are presented on the screen right now, these were actually done just north of Arlington on SR 530 at 211th and 59th. The T intersection that is shown there on the bottom left, that's about the same size and scale that the one at Fakima Road will look like. So that's what you should just about expect to see. So I wanted to talk briefly about why we're doing this project. So as Chris mentioned, it all comes down to safety. The state has a program that is specifically aimed toward crash prevention. And so all of the intersections in the state that meet certain criteria, those criteria being that it's in a rural location, that it's currently stop controlled, and that it has enough space, whether in the pavement or in the right-of-way, to construct one of these without having larger impacts, is given consideration. All of those are put through criteria to screen for potential for serious or fatal injuries, and that potential is defined as a high percentage of angle collisions, which are typically the most severe, and then a higher actual crash rate per our crash data than what the models from the highway safety manuals would predict should be happening at that intersection. So for SR20 and FACMA specifically, over the last 10 years, this is 2014 to 2023 data, there have been 25 crashes out there that has involved 53 vehicles and resulted in 18 injuries. And the most unfortunate statistic about that is that 65% of those are either angle or head-on collisions, which are the types that we can start to address with a roundabout.
She has a quick question.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Real quickly, can you define what an angle collision is?
So think like a T-bone. When there's a very engineering definition that I don't really, but it's like between certain angles of 180 and 90 is considered or between 0 and 180 is considered an angle collision. Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. I don't even know what that one is in its entirety. So, these projects are not. We never like to develop these in a vacuum, especially when we have 4 jurisdictions who all have a significant interest in the location. So, as Alex mentioned earlier, the conversations about this project have been going on for a couple of years between all the jurisdictions shown on screen. The first about year was in the planning phase, making sure that our designs were forward compatible, that we understood what we were going to do out there, what some of the land use and local projects would be that might influence things. And then for the last year, we've been meeting monthly with this group of organizations and have been talking about how we actually implement it. So what's the traffic control look like? What do the detours look like? How big's the thing going to be, et cetera? And generally, we've heard support for the roundabout, given the safety implications there. And we have tried to incorporate as much of the feedback from the city and from the county as we could, as our scope and budget allow. So with that said, I want to show a rendering, at least, of what the design should look like when it is completed. I won't go into all of the nitty-gritty detail of it, but I wanted to bring 3 things to y'all's attention. First is you'll see a lot of kind of red pavement there in the middle where the vehicles will be going around, and not a lot of vegetation or greenery. That's one of the side effects, I guess, for lack of a better term, of these compact roundabouts is they are small enough to be able to get the safety benefit that we want and fit within the existing pavement, but that means that the center islands and some of those have to be mountable for larger vehicles, whether that be freight or military vehicles or farming equipment. They need to be able to get through this intersection without having to, without anything impeding their way. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of opportunities for gateway features at roundabouts like this. The other feature is the crossings. There are crosswalks shown on here that are not out there currently. One of the big pushes within the safety realm at DOT in particular is making sure that we're not focusing just on vehicles, but that we're also focusing on active transportation users. So we've been able to shorten up the crossings, provide refuge areas. Some of the thicker white lines on this rendering are actually additional curbing that will be out there to help channelize vehicles and provide some level of separation from active transportation users.
Are those pedestrian crossings also going to have lights in them? Because that's a dark area there.
So there will be lights as part of this.
Okay.
We have lighting standards for roundabouts, and there will actually be a new, there's already lights along the western side, but on the eastern side, there's lighting that makes sure the crosswalk along FACMA has appropriate lighting levels, as well as along or across 20. And so the last thing that I wanted to point out on here is the fact that there's only one lane in each direction. In its current configuration, there are 2 southbound lanes from Altfield to the top of the hill. Primarily, that's used for slow vehicles to get out of the way after the Altfield signal. That was a point of a lot of discussion amongst all the partner agencies, as well as our headquarters traffic folks and our region traffic folks. And ultimately, the decision was made that between Altfield and the roundabout, the best decision to balance all of the needs, vehicular, pedestrian, scope, budget, all that, was to remove the second lane between Altfield and Fakima. That second lane develops again in the form of a passing shoulder south of the intersection, so there will still be an opportunity for vehicles, slow-moving vehicles, to get out of the way. But obviously, that's going to be a big change for drivers in the area. So a lot of folks, after we talk about what the design actually looks like, get very interested in how it will be built. And I'm hoping this video plays. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Apologies, what did I do there?
I have a question on the crosswalks. Are you going to put sidewalks on that west side of the roadway? Because there's no sidewalk on that west side of the roadway at all, and that intersection's extensively, it's a far distance from the Altfield intersection.
So as part of this project, there are no plans to install sidewalk. It will still be shoulder, although with the reduction of the one lane, we've been able to widen that shoulder as much as possible to allow for an area that gives as much separation as possible between vehicles and pedestrians or bicyclists. But there's no specific sidewalk to be built.
So you're encouraging pedestrians to go onto a shoulder where there's no cover because they're not on a sidewalk. Is it better to wait till just not pave the pedestrian crosswalk portion?
So pedestrians aren't precluded from being able to use our shoulders on highways like this anyway. We design them to a certain width that they can be used. It's not necessarily encouraged, but it's not disallowed. And so we need to design these assuming that folks are using them. And the safest way or the most appropriate way to address folks wanting to cross from the east to the west side is to have those marked crossings and just make the largest amount of separation that we can. In the long term, the complete streets plan for this area actually relies on the Bridge to Boat Trail being connected and providing a very much separated, like 12-foot wide path for both bicyclists and pedestrians who can remove themselves from the highway traffic altogether. So I don't know if you have a chance to, can you hit the play button on this video? I don't seem to have the ability to be able to do it. Yeah, so I'm sharing this largely because folks are very interested in how we're going to build these. Any construction on the state highway system is impactful. And so I brought this along to show generally what the construction looks like. This is a project that was built on SR 203 just south of Monroe just last year. While the specifics of what they're doing may not be the most important to this audience, the fact, I hope you'll notice that the roadway is shut down in its entirety. That's one of the things that we have to consider as part of these projects in particular is full roadway closures, because since they are meant to be low cost and low impact and built within the existing footprint, having vehicles and contractors and inspectors share that space concurrently doesn't provide a real safe option for anyone. And so the last 4 or 5 projects that we have done have all been under full closures. And we're expecting the same from this particular project. So before I get into what that closure looks like, I wanted to kind of talk about what would happen before and after the full closure. That will be the least impactful part of construction. There is single lane closures and shoulder closures that will occur over weeknights usually. It'll look very similar to our maintenance operations where there will be flaggers and people will still be able to get through the work zone. However, to construct the actual roundabout portion does require the road to be closed. And at this point, we're projecting that it would be about a 90-hour closure of SR 20. That typically extends on the other projects. It has extended from Friday night after peak period through to Tuesday afternoon, early evening sometime. Obviously, the goal will be to get it done as soon as we can, but concrete takes time to cure, asphalt takes time to cool, etc. So we recognize that that's incredibly impactful to the community, to travelers in general. We've worked with Alex and the other partners to identify any alternatives and haven't been able to come up with anything that is feasible or safe. And so while we recognize there is inconvenience to it, and it's certainly impactful, we all felt that that was an achievable approach and that a 5-day impact is probably more palatable to everybody than a very prolonged construction season trying to stage things in and around the area. But in order to do that closure, we will need to have detours in place, and so there will be 3 concurrent detours. The primary one for that north-south traffic is projected to use Altfield and Goldie Road, not just because that's the shortest and most direct path to get people off the highway and then back onto it, but also that area is largely commercial and industrial, so less impactful to the residents. Concurrently, we'll have 2, a northbound and a southbound detour for those who are looking to get onto the east side of the road to get to FACMA, their properties, their businesses, whatever may be over there. Those will utilize Sleeper and Crescent Harbor and get folks off on either end of the closure that should extend from Regatta to Altfield. So that's a little bit about how we'll construct it. So now when will we construct it? The project is approaching 100% design right now, so we are anticipating to advertise it in February, early February, which means we will probably have a contractor on board by the end of Q1. That means construction could start as early as the second quarter, although given the need for good weather, given the holidays that we need to work the weekends around, given special local events that are happening, I don't project that that's going to happen until later on into the summer. But either way, no matter when it starts, we're expecting that work is going to be completed in its entirety by the end of this year. And so Chris mentioned the low cost aspect of this. So in total, this project is coming in at $3.3 million for design, construction, and inspection. And I recognize that $3.3 million is not a small sum of money. However, in comparison to full-size roundabouts and some of the other things that my team in particular is designing, we're seeing a 50% plus reduction in overall costs to achieve, a very similar benefit. So this still does meet the intent of our low-impact, low-cost funding framework. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about before taking some questions is just how are we going to communicate this to everybody, because it will be impactful. One of the first steps is speaking with you all. We also presented to IRTPO this morning just to help spread the word. But as we get closer to construction, folks are going to need to know a little bit more detail about what's going on and how do we plan for it. Well, we will have communication specialists who are assigned to this project for the duration of construction. They are going to help spread information as soon as possible and in the ways that will reach the most folks out here. Additionally, we have one of our communication specialists, Madison, with us here today. We also have a project website that is live now and will be live through construction and will be regularly updated. And then we'll also be using social media tools as well as our contacts in traditional media to help spread this word as much as we can to try and reduce impacts to folks. So DOT's goal with these, as always, is no surprises. We recognize that it's impactful, but the more people know in advance, the better they can plan for it, and kind of the least impacts we'll hope to see during actual construction. So with that, that's what I've got prepared for you. We'd be happy to take any questions, though.
All right, so before I turn it over to council for questions, Alex, I would just encourage you to put her in contact with Maggie, our public information officer, so that they can work in tandem on communicating this out. So with that, any questions from council? Yes, Councilmember Stuckey.
I'm making some assumptions, so correct me if I'm wrong, because I like data, I like objective data more than subjective data. First question, DOT is a focus. You concentrate primarily more on safety than traffic flow. Is that correct? The safety is more paramount than traffic flow when it comes to assigning projects.
Safety is of utmost importance on all the things that we do.
Correct. So hopefully our city engineer bugs you about Swanton 20, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. I had to plug it. One thing I've gotten some questions on regarding this particular project that I just need to be able to better answer for people is, just north of it, you have Alt Field. And Alt Field's not that far. It's not like half a mile or anything like that. Why was this Fakima chosen for a roundabout as opposed to Alt Field just to the north, which seems to have a whole lot more traffic coming from Alt Field to 20 than Fakima to 20?
Sure. So part of it has to do with work that's already been done out there, but largely it's the funding source that we have. This funding source is, it only looks at intersections that are classified as rural and are stop sign controlled. Ones with signals weren't taken into account during that statewide review effort. And so since there is already a signal at Alt Field, which controls the intersection and reduces some of the potential for some of the collision types that we see at Fakima. Fakima was a candidate for this funding opportunity, whereas Alt Field would not have been in consideration for this bucket of money.
So take that requirement out of it. If you know off the top of your head, that's great. If not, from strictly a safety perspective, then, is there more accidents at Fakima in 20 than Alt Field in 20 due to the stop lights?
I don't know the answer to that question. When this project gets handed off to one of our offices, all the data and traffic review
Sure.
has been done. We're responsible for the design aspect, so I don't know if you have information on that. But so I can't answer that question, but we could look into it and
Sure.
get Alex back some info to share with everybody.
I only ask because I've had a large number of people. I mean, you're always going to have those people say, we don't like a roundabout or we don't need a roundabout
Sure.
there. But I've had enough people ask why there and not Alt Field just north of it. I understand what you're saying from that. Logically, from a non-engineering perspective, well, Alt Field makes a whole lot more sense. I mean, there's more traffic. It just makes more sense. So it'd be nice to have a more articulate answer. And if it's from a safety perspective, and you could say, the data shows this many accidents at Fakima, this many Alt Field, that's easy to point to. But without that data, it's kind of like, well, it seems like that's the more dangerous one.
Sure, and I think that's a fair question for the constituency to ask. What I would say to that is that for this particular just funding source, they are classified in different ways, so it wasn't eligible for this type of funding. That doesn't mean that the issue that they have observed there is not happening. In fact, I've spoken with the state traffic engineer who was helping us come up with some of the design specifics for this, who indicated that Alt Field is a busier intersection. Alt Field does have a lot of constraints to it, and that signal may be nearing the end of its life given when it was installed. So if and when funding is available or there is an opportunity to reassess what that intersection looks like in the future, it could be a roundabout. I don't. That will obviously have to happen at the time that project's under assessment. But it was kind of, I guess, in this case, comparing apples and oranges for this particular bucket of money that we were permitted to use for improvements. Out
Sure, I understand that completely. Sometimes it is a little difficult to talk to, folks in our community on technicality of a funding source is why this was chosen as opposed to that. But, that's why I just say it's made at a higher level than us and throw you under the bus. So that's all the questions I have, and I appreciate it. And Swanton and 20 roundabout.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I echo Councilor Stuckey's suggestion to check out Swanton and 20. And I went to the website that you mentioned, which has, it's great. It's really easy to navigate and user-friendly and has all of the information you provided today. the funding source, the estimate that we just got is 3.3, and on the website it says that you've got funding of 2.75 million. Has that just not been updated, or does that only cover construction?
So
What's the
that hasn't
discrepancy?
been fully updated
Okay.
since, when was it? When did Complete Streets come around? In 2022?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that estimate was one that was put together before the Complete Streets assessments had to come into effect. And so when this was being planned a year and a half, 2 years ago, before it got to design, there weren't assumptions in there for the Complete Streets aspects. And so when that went through the planning phase and some additional elements were added in to meet the intent of the Complete Streets legislation, that's when the total bumped up to 3.3.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not
Yeah,
We're not
and
gonna run out of money.
there are a couple things
Okay.
on the website that need to be updated. I think it even says there's an add date in December of this year, which is not accurate. It's February. So we do need to update those.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for the explanation.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, so if you look at the congestion that exists at Swantown and 20, I think the argument could be made that, that contributes to the distracted driving throughout the rest of town, or the road rage, or maybe even, it's rough enough some days. I mean, it might even contribute to the drinking and driving, which is just wild. I would never advise that. With FACMA and 20, is there, because there's already a, not to code, but there's already a frontage road that goes from FACMA almost to the stoplight through a residential area there. Is there any thought ever that realigning an intersection and would making Altfield a four-way make more sense? Just a question. I'm not a traffic engineer by any means, and I don't play one on TV.
I am also not a traffic engineer, so I won't try and answer for what could or couldn't be done. That wasn't assessed as part of this effort and this project. It doesn't mean it's not something that could be looked at in the future, but I don't have any information one way or the other to tell whether it would be or not.
And I know it not shoot the messenger here at all, and you see it throughout government quite often. I wish that before we were going to spend $3.3 million of taxpayer dollars, I wish that there was a process to evaluate all those other things as well. But again, I know you guys are doing your job totally, and I think up near Anacortes, if you look at Sharp's Corner and up at the top of the hill, I mean, those two roundabouts, maybe they were controversial at the time. I haven't been stuck in traffic there since, and in the past it used to be brutal, so they do work. Thank you.
And if I could maybe just kind of address that, we really appreciate Chris and Adam being here with WashDOT, and just so you know, they are tremendous to work with. They are fantastic partners, so that really helps Alex and I to have trusted people to work with. But, dealing with the state funding that we go out and get, and we did West Woodby, and we're doing 7th Street now, and the federal money that we as a city go out and get, a lot of these programs are the same. So I think it could help council with these questions you get, and also the questions I get is that, for example, Altfield Road is already controlled. It already has a signal. So replacing it with a roundabout doesn't necessarily provide any capacity improvements. So you're not, it's already improved, is the way you think. And Swantown is already improved, whether you like it or not, which we all don't like it. But it's already improved. It already has a signal on it, and so does Altfield. And so to spend money to go put a roundabout where you already have a traffic signal just will never is a strong word. We're very unlikely to get any kind of money anywhere to go do that. Now, as Adam knows, roundabouts are fairly new, but they've really shown to be tremendously better from a safety standpoint than traffic signals, not in every situation, but a lot, because unfortunately, when you look at the data, and I know Chief Slovak's looked at the data, there's a lot of head-on and T-bones at a traffic signal where people just go through the red light, and it's very scary, and so don't look at that data. But when you're going through a signal, be very, especially late at night, where roundabouts are much better at diverting cars, so you tend to get cars that will go at slow speeds and hit each other sideways instead of being T-boned or hitting head-on. So that's where roundabouts are really, that's why you're seeing so many of them, is really from the safety standpoint, not from necessarily a capacity standpoint. So again, Altfield's already improved. You have a signal there. That's addressing the capacity issues. That's addressing the safety issues. So you're done. You're not going to get any more funding for that until it reaches, like Adam said, the end of its useful life. So hopefully that's helpful too. So really, if you have a signal that's not controlled and it's just a stop sign and there's a lot of accidents there, that's where we can get funding to improve that uncontrolled intersection.
Thank you, Steve. Councilmember Arms.
Thank you for addressing Fakima. It is a mess. Trying to go out or in, it's always a mess. It's like, oh geez, I wonder who's going to get who first. So I'm really happy that you're doing that. I mean, probably we could use the sidewalk, but having traveled that road enough, I don't like it. I'm glad we're addressing it. And maybe it will help some of the traffic, even coming off of Otfield, coming down that way, because it's always, which lane and what are we doing? And so I appreciate that, because it has been a nightmare. I've had enough of fun with Fakima, thank you. So thank you very much.
All right, anybody else for the good of the order? Hearing nothing. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, the next item on the agenda is our finance and mayor's preliminary biennial budget. And to kind of tee this off with Deputy City Administrator David Goldman, I just want to announce that we have received confirmation that we received the COPS grants for our 5 new police officers. So that's great news. Great job, Chief Slowick, Wendy, everyone involved. Everyone worked really hard on that. So thank you so much. And with that, here is David Goldman.
Good afternoon. David Goldman, Deputy City Administrator, Finance Director. As someone else is talking.
Sorry, we're just shuffling to allow all the directors in.
All right, I'll pause. Yeah, no, all 300 pages, because you got to include the Exhibit A. Yeah. All right. Let's get the show on the road. So this is the mayor's proposed preliminary 2025-26 biennial budget. So the budget document itself is about 200 pages, but there's exhibits and attachments that expand that number even higher. But the document itself is made up of the mayor's budget message, council priorities, preliminary budget highlights, our organizational structure, a budget summary and funds, and then our long-term capital plan. The mayor's message, it's about 3 pages long. It contains an overview of the delivery of city services, valuing staff. It gives an overview of some of the grant-funded capital projects, talks about how the council reduced the utility rates for sewer by 19%, and touches on the city council priorities. The differences between today's budget, which is the preliminary proposed, and the budget that we're going to provide in October, which is called the preliminary budget, are minor. Basically, this is a preview, kind of a look at the budget before we make the initial submittal of the preliminary budget to the council. There will be changes between now and October. Those changes will include city council feedback. Ideally, we'd get that feedback from city council within the next 2 weeks so we can work it into the October budget, because it'll be on the October workshop on the 23rd. We're going to continue to look at revenue and expenditure trends. We may have gotten new information, such as grant notifications from our vendors on perhaps increases to costs, for example, solid waste and water, which I'll be getting into soon, and any changes to our capital projects that we've gotten new information about. We'll also do a further detailed review, and we'll be shooting to provide our detailed department and program information in that budget. And that'll be presented at the next workshop in October. So this is the remaining calendar for the year for the budget. Today is the preliminary proposed, October is the proposed. In November 5th, we'll be having 2 public hearings. First public hearing is about the property tax increase of 1%, and another public hearing on the proposed budget. And then the adoption hearing for the budget is scheduled for November 19th. So page 10 has all the council priorities, which the council adopted last month. You can see the council priorities on your sheet. Budget highlights is on page 6. Some of the budget highlights include the program performance budget. I'm actually going to spend a little bit of time on this slide to talk about some of the things that are highlights and changes and things to look out for in the upcoming 2 years. So the budget, so we talk about program performance budgeting, and I guess I should talk a little bit about, what that is compared to the traditional type budgeting. So that's included in the budget document. Basically, the traditional type budgeting is where you just take last year's budget and just add a little bit to it, and there you have the new budget. It doesn't really do a good job at looking closely at everything the city provides. So in order to overcome these shortcomings, we're going to be implementing a program performance budget where we break everything that the city does down into services and operations that the city delivers, and breaks it all down into smaller, more easily understandable components. And then it ties dedicated revenues that are related to those component units into city services to develop a better understanding of revenue coverage. And then all those services that we break things down into, we build them up into smaller chunks under the department called programs. And then we go ahead and apply performance measurements to each program to help provide a better understanding of program outcomes and trends. So working together over the last 6 months with all the departments, we have developed 62 programs, and that'll be included in October in the next iteration of the budget. We have done some research on what it takes to transition to this more advanced style of budgeting with other cities, and it does take a number of budget cycles to get it to where it's more perfected. So we do expect to see some of the programs and measurements that are in this budget to change in future budget cycles as we learn more information. Another highlight is the Facilities and Infrastructure Reserve for Replacement. That's Fund 504. It's an internal service fund. This fund has existed for a number of years, but has not been utilized to its full potential in the past. So we're going to be using it to its full potential in this budget. It basically will receive funds from all departments that have facilities and utility infrastructure, and we'll collect those funds, and as the need arises to fund capital projects to repair and replace that infrastructure and facilities, the money will then come out of it, similar to our Equipment and Vehicle Internal Service Fund. So with streets funding, I've been mentioning pretty much every chance I get when we talk about revenues to council that due to the outdated way the state funds transportation repair and maintenance, funding has peaked about 20 years ago at a level that's about 25% higher than it is today. The main method of funding street repairs for cities is the motor vehicle fuel tax. Because we're an island, us and San Juan County, we get something called the CAPRON, which is an additional amount of revenue to help repair and replace streets and roads. We've been doing our best to triage the situation over the past 4 years by utilizing the flexibility provisions provided with the real estate excise tax revenues. But unfortunately, using the maximum amount of money that we can use from the real estate excise tax, we're going to be running out of funding for streets by the end of the biennial period. So in order to solve that, we'll be bringing revenue options to City Council to consider in the next year or two. One of those options might be the potential to do an additional 1/10 of 1 cent on the sales tax for the Transportation Benefit District. That should raise about $550,000 or so. But that'll be for a future discussion next year. Recreation is new for the general fund. Recreation was in a separate fund, the Senior Center Fund, Fund 129, for a number of years. It's now that Parks and Recreation has been created as an official department, we're moving that into the general fund. So prior to this move, the general fund provided about a $200,000 subsidy to the Senior Center Fund for recreational activities. Now that it's in a general fund, that subsidy goes away because you don't subsidize within the same fund, with a transfer. Also, additional staff and resources were provided by council via budget amendments and adjustments to support recreational initiatives during the last biennial, or the current biennial, because we're still in '24. The idea for that would be that revenues would eventually be generated to cover a significant portion of those additional expenses. And the previous administration provided Parks a 2-year window to ramp up activities and generate additional revenue coverage to help defray those costs of the added staff and resources. As currently budgeted, the difference in the recreation department, it's a Parks and Recreation department, but Parks is like Department 70 and Recreation is Department 71, if you want to get technical. So just looking at the 71 portion of the Parks and Recreation department, the expenses are greater than revenues by the tune of $750,000 on the average for each biennial. However, we did used to apply a $200,000 subsidy. So taking that away from that, and also the new facility and infrastructure reserve for replacement charge of $165,000, if you don't count those, then the difference would be about $395,000 on the average for 25 and 26 between expenses and revenues. The next item is Marina. In preparation for dredging, the Marina Fund has budgeted $400,000 for each year of the biennial to be placed in a reserve. In addition, the Marina Fund has $250,000 programmed in 25 for the Marina dock improvements, about $236,000 for the facility and infrastructure reserve for replacement, and that's set to start in 26, not 25, for Marina. And in 2026 has a little over $19 million programmed for the FDOC storm damage repair project, Marina dredging, and the Marina breakwater replacement and mitigation projects. And most of that is scheduled to be funded by future debt, future unsecured grants, and that Marina Fund reserve I talked about. Unfortunately, if you look at the 2-year plan for the Marina Fund, the amount of available fund balance will be dropping precipitously. And because of that, revenue options, we'll continue to bring revenue options to council to discuss, like we did at the roundtable a couple weeks ago. Perhaps a new port district, maybe a metropolitan parks district, or there's also the potential to look at a business and occupation tax as well. That was talked about earlier this year, and also at that roundtable. Water. So the preliminary information from Anacortes is showing that wholesale water rates for 25 will be increasing by $451,000 or 22.5% from the current year's budget of $2 million. The $2 million, the budget for wholesale water has been $2 million for the last 6 years, and that's been more than enough to cover the amount from Anacortes. But until now, the amount that they're charging has gone up, and it is down from the initial charge that they put forward in 2023 because of our discussions with them, but it's still going to be higher than 24. And 26, we're projecting to be around the same as 25. And because of this, it doesn't look like the water fund rates as they currently are will be sufficient to cover these additional costs. So we'll be bringing sometime next year a proposed water rate adjustment for the council to consider. In addition, solid waste. We were notified by Island County to plan for a 20% increase for our tipping fees for residential and commercial, which represent the bulk of costs in those funds. I was informed 2 days ago that we should plan for a 22% increase instead of the 20% increase, so that's slightly higher. That'll be a change when I go to October. And unfortunately, our solid waste rates, due to those increases, they look like they won't be sufficient to continue covering those costs. So we'll be bringing the council proposed solid waste rate increases for consideration sometime next year to take effect in 26. So those are the highlights. But other than that, things are no. So on page.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer has a question.
Go ahead.
Thanks, David. Yeah, if I could ask a quick question, going back to the 71, I guess it would be the recreation expenses.
Yes, 71. Yeah.
You were really careful there to word that a past administration had given it time, and I do remember that Mayor Severns and the administrator at the time were concerned of the long-term viability, and I did go ahead and vote for it for the sake of being unanimous. didn't feel like it was a sword worth falling on. But I did, at the time, did very clearly point out my concern that, nationwide recreation programming doesn't pay for itself a majority of the time. I think our Park and Rec director at the time, I think, said 70% nationwide didn't. And knowing how much more expensive the cost of doing business in the state of Washington is, specifically Whidbey Island, and, having worked in Park and Recs for the last 8 years myself, I was very concerned. Looking into this next biennial, could we sustain a $750,000 loss? Probably, if that's what council decides. In the next biennial, can we? I don't know that we know the answer to that. I think that whenever the next financial recession hits, I think we all know that we wouldn't be able to sustain a loss like that. So moving ahead with that programming, I worry that we do start to elbow out some of these programs, some of these volunteer programs that have sustained, over the last 20 years. And when that recession hits, I would hate for us to create this vacuum and there just not to be anything left for the community. So that continues to be my concern there. The loss doesn't so much concern me as the fact that it doesn't seem like the community participation has been there yet. So for me to support it going forward, I'm going to need a lot of information, from Parks and Recreation on why it will look different into the next biennial, I guess.
Okay.
So, but anything you want to add on that now or next time, just let me know, because I know you're very cautious and.
Well, we could have, departments, not today, but you have another few months before the
Exactly.
adoption. We can have some meetings on that and talk.
Yeah.
further
And
on that.
like I said, I'm not decided on it at all. Just do have some concerns. Thank you.
Should I continue or go ahead?
I'm going to do the piggybacking because, that is a bit of a shortfall loss there, and the participation has been lower. Brian, do you have any thoughts? I mean, I remember you speaking that at some point, it takes time that these things could be net neutral or even a revenue generator. I mean, are things where you kind of expected them to be this far along? We're not that far along, but is this kind of where you expected things to be? Or what's the outlook look for closing that gap and getting more participation from the public? Without getting to, I understand future me. I'm just trying to get the snapshot.
We can get more
why he's
detail,
here.
but maybe a snapshot, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to hijack the meeting with going on a tangent, but we're pretty much where we were expecting to be. When we presented to council last year, I think we were hoping to start programming in the fall. That got delayed, so we didn't get our recreation coordinator on until March of this year, right? So we just barely started programming in the spring and summer. Now we have our fall activity guide out. We're going to be starting some sport leagues and some of the higher revenue programs like camps and different things like that. So we're going along like we said, and we told council all the time it's going to take about 2 years for us to get the programs built out. Some of those programs are higher than 100% cost recovery. Some of those are higher subsidized depending on the type of program. And so ideally we will have those higher revenue programs helping support the lower cost recovery programs, right? So it takes, and there's some front end costs, right, to setting up the program.
So right now it's mostly the more subsidized than the high revenue generating ones that you're doing.
Not necessarily. We're just getting started though with some of these.
All right, thank you.
All right. Okay. To continue, our comprehensive financial management policies are located on page 12. They talk about our general financial goals, our investment policy, our revenue policies, and a bunch of miscellaneous policies that are available for you to take a look at and provide feedback on. Our city's financial structure. I went over this in more detail during the primer, I think in the spring, but generally all city governments have two major types of funds. You have the governmental funds and you have the proprietary funds, and those are treated with two different types of accounting rules based on the requirements. Our governmental funds, the biggest one is the general fund, which has fire, police, finance, parks and rec, and so on. Our special revenue funds, which are the types of funds that have a specific type of revenue that needs to be used for specific items, such as our streets fund, has motor vehicle fuel tax going into that. Our, impact fee funds has specific funds that can only be used for certain things. Our debt service funds, which we have one of, that's to pay for a lighting loan that we took out from the state. Most of the debt is single fund debt, so it just gets paid directly out of the fund, but this debt service fund for this one gets money from various funds. So that's why it's in this category. Then we have our capital projects funds. We only have a few left of those because most of the capital projects are built as part of a sub-fund within the main funds. Like water has a sub-fund for capital projects, general fund has a sub-fund for capital projects. The capital project, the only one remaining left is the Windjammer Park Capital Project Fund because it's just, it's a big, it's a very big project and that's how they wanted to account for it. Then our proprietary funds are our enterprise funds, which are all utilities funds and also the marina. And then our internal service funds like the facility and the facility and infrastructure reserve, our equipment and vehicle reserve, and most of public works as well. So the way we handled the budget last year, and we continued it to this year, is we provided everybody with a base budget that would be sufficient to continue their current operations. If they needed anything above and beyond that, then they would submit these decision packages for the mayor and the administration to review. And here you see a list of the items that were approved to be included into this proposed preliminary budget. You can see the total impact for the general fund is about $77,000 per year. And you have the impact for the internal service funds there, as well as the marina funds. What's that? I don't have that on me. Yeah, the page numbers changed a bit. Yeah, the page numbers changed a bit as I was putting this together, but yeah. So the total impact on the budget is $175,000 or $128,000, depending on the year. And then we have two slides here of the personnel requests that were approved to be in the budget. You can see for the first slide is just the general fund impacts, and that's about $185,000 for the first year. And then we also asked folks to provide us information regarding the startup costs, like how much is a new computer, how much will the phone be. You'll see fire has larger startup costs because that's all training, because the firefighters, they basically need that training to be able to save lives, whereas a financial analyst needs training to save budgets. Oh, come on, I practiced. All right. Anyway, so that's the general funds. And then the second slide is all the other funds. You have the internal service funds, which is pretty much all public works and engineering. And then you have the streets fund, which is also public works. There's a street specialist in there. And then, of course, we have the utility funds, which is on the bottom there. And there's a couple positions in there as well, and some reclassifications and so on. So the grand total for all funds, the impact is about $600,000 plus the one-time initial cost of about $53,000. So this is the all funds biennial budget. About a quarter of the total budget is general funds. About 22% are those internal service funds. 42% are those enterprise funds, the utility fund and marina. Then you have those special revenue funds, about 8%. And then you have that Windjammer Park Capital Project Fund, which is about 3%, and the debt service fund is really a small fund. So, and here's a chart of the revenues for all the funds. I broke it up into the recurring revenues, which are revenues we pretty much get every year. They do vary, like investment earnings I have projected to go down because it's pretty much dependent on the market and the Fed, and it looks like interest rates will be going down in 25 and 26. Then you have the non-recurring revenues, which are pretty much bond proceeds if we happen to be floating a bond that year, or grants and insurance recoveries and stuff that's less predictable as you go out through the years. Then the mix are miscellaneous type things. Those are like developer contributions, pension costs. Those things are done at the end of the year as part of the audit, the year-end procedures. It's not, those two things aren't really budgeted during the year.
Just talk about that bond proceeds line though, that goes from 200 to 9.9 million.
Oh, okay, yeah. So in 2023, that's an actual number, and that is the fire bonds. That is the money to build the fire station and to buy the Quint. In 2024, there was a budget for bond proceeds, but that's not going to happen. That was just put in there when we put the 2-year budget together. Is in 2022, and we weren't sure of the timing of the bonds for the fire. So we got it all in 23. So you're going to see a zero there. So in 26, so you see like in 26, the mayor was asking that 9.9 million. That's Marina. The Marina project was programmed in there with future prospective bonds and future prospective unsecured grants, and also a little bit of money from the Marina Fund itself, that reserve I talked about earlier. So that's what those are. And then those interfund revenues, those are interfund allocations such as the facility, interfund allocation, the equipment and vehicle one, and those kind of things.
David?
Engineering too.
While you're on that subject, there's that big spike there in the 2025 budget for interfund revenues, and I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. It looks like what we did is we swept some of the ending fund balances, because we've got several funds that we've been carrying over balances in, and
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that's the people's money, and we need to be putting it to work. So I'm kind of okay with that. I know we've always, in years past, kind of budgeted based on those beginning balances, right? And trying to maintain those beginning balances, but those beginning balances are just sitting there and they're balances, and why we want to be fiscally prudent, and it's great to have these, large carryovers from year to year. Also, we have needs. So I just want to make sure I'm clear in the fact that quite a bit of that interfund revenue is a sweep of some of those beginning fund balances, including some of the enterprise funds that we haven't been contributing from those funds to internal capital projects such as the 504 fund, right? And so a large amount of that money in 2025 is sweeping those funds, taking and basically making a correction for the fact that we haven't been collecting from those funds for quite some time.
It's a rate-funded system reinvestment. So basically, when I showed the revenue update 2 months ago, it showed really large fund balances in some of our enterprise funds, but in reality, those fund balances were for future repair and replacements. So the fact that it was showing up in these funds as it wasn't like money that we could spend willy-nilly. It was specifically for that purpose, and we weren't really using our facility and infrastructure replacement reserve the way that we should have been using it. So we did go ahead and start using it to where it needs to be used. And also we looked at the past couple of years since the rate study was completed and the council adopted those rates in 22, and we calculated what we should have been putting into that reserve for future replacements, and that's where we came up with that number.
So basically, we're capturing about $12 million in that interfund transfer the first year, which is actually a couple of year catch-up. And that figure of the 21,968 moving forward, that's actually the number we would kind of expect moving forward with the contribution from each of those funds into those 504 funds, rather than just building beginning balances.
The rule that we should be using is whatever the depreciation is in the funds, we should be using that to go ahead and put in the reserve for replacements, because that's basically what we're calculating depreciation based on that exact thing. So we are going ahead and moving as much as feasible into the reserve for replacement for that very purpose.
And just to be clear for anybody out there who is even listening or cares, we're still carrying reserve balances in these funds, including the general fund, which not only do we have a reserve balance in, but we have an excess reserve balance, which we added for a rainy day. And we carried over $4.5 million in reserves, and added actually another $4.5 million to that reserve account, basically ARPA funds, right? That we
part of it.
But a large part of it, right? So we've got about $9 million, if I'm not mistaken, sitting in the general fund reserve right now, aside from the excess reserves.
I'm actually probably going to go over that in a few slides.
Okay.
I think I have that.
Okay, I just want to make sure we all understand this, that we are rating some beginning balances,
Yeah.
right? Some carryover balances, but we're not necessarily rating reserve
The
accounts.
unencumbered beginning fund balance for the general fund in '25 is about $8 million. But the encumbered, the reserved fund balance that's restricted or committed or assigned is about $8 million as well. And that's restricted because of, the 10%'s in Fund 002 technically, but that's restricted because of our operating policy where we have 2 months' worth of expenses put in operating reserve for the general fund. We also have the fire levy. We're not, the fire station's not open yet, and we are building up funding to help pay for the firefighters and the operating of the new station once it all comes into play. That was something that was programmed in when we initially went out to the voters, that we would have this money sitting there. So as the firefighters, get hired and, they get their increases over time, we would have a pot of money to continue, to continue paying them without having to dip into the regular general funds, over a long period of time.
It's obviously important that we be very transparent about this revenue category, right? Because you're going to be moving on to the expense category here next, right? And we're going to see a pretty good increase in that also. I mean, obviously, we're looking at a on-paper increase of about, $13 million from 2024 budget to 2025. A lot of that $13 million, however, being shifting of money we already have. Obviously, the recurring revenues, those are projections based upon, the history and et cetera. But we are, to an extent, artificially increasing our revenues for a couple of years by moving some money around, right? So it's important that we understand, but at the same time, we're not touching reserve balances. Because again, when we get onto the expense side, right, where we've got about a $30 million increase in expense, that we're going to be talking about 10 million of that right off the bat being the fire department bond, right, coming in, right? But the rest of that, vast majority of that is money that's going into now this other reserve account for some capital outlay projects that we have coming forward. Would that be a correct statement?
Yeah. And the thing about, future repair and replacement, but the thing about internal service funds, it kind of doubles the budget. So it's like a transfer. So if you have a $1 million transfer to another fund, it's going to show up once in this fund and then another $1 million in this fund. It's the same $1 million, but overall it looks like $2 million just because that's the nature of those internal service funds and the transfers.
Well, and then it also shows on the expense side.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. It would show the budget itself, revenues and expenses both go up. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. So, next slide. These are the all-fund expenditure trends. This includes, general fund and enterprise funds, all the funds that we have. And you could see that, the first row is the capital outlay. That's, in the first year, it's about $29 million. And then you have about $26.6 million in 26, and that's all contained, in the budget book. All the different capital projects are in there. There's our debt service. You'll see that the debt service in 25 and 26 is going down. That's because we're going to be refunding, or we're going to be, We're going to be consolidating the debt with the Department of Ecology on the clean water facility. So that means we'll be reducing our debt service commensurate with the 19% reduction to the sewer rates. So that category is going down. We talked about the interfund charges just before, operating and maintenance. Operating and maintenance also includes some capital projects. If you have a capital project that's like a repair or or a replacement type of capital projects, it's going to show up in the operating and maintenance category. It's not going to show up in the capital outlay category. The capital outlay category is for new stuff, for expansions. So that's
but a considerable amount of that capital outlay is actually at a reserve setting up, isn't it? Or is that true capital outlay?
Well, we'll get to that when we get to the capital projects section. And then there are those transfers we talked about too on the bottom. And also we have the personnel. The personnel, we just have, those bargaining agreements that were agreed to. And we're also including a 2.5% cost of living adjustment for the non-represented employees for 2025 and a 2% cost of living adjustment for the non-represented employees in 2026.
And that increase in interfund charges, that is reflective of our new policy for collecting from some of these funds
Yes.
for the replacement fund. So that's a figure that we should expect to continue on 16, 17, maybe 18 million and 27, et cetera. That's not really a spike number. That's a change in policy number.
That's a change in policy number, as long as the funding's available to continue doing it. Also, it wasn't just the, internal service fund that was implemented, but there were other funds that we also, like the vehicle and replacement fund, the amount coming from departments went up as well because just the cost of replacements of vehicles, and we also bought a bunch of new vehicles over the past 2 years, so we have to start collecting for that as well, so.
So again, important for anybody listening, right? It's not true money or true money being spent. This is government bookkeeping, right? At its finest, and a lot of this is actually money we're pooling for future expenses and for maintenance and operation in the future. Not money we're spending today.
Yep. So now to the general fund. The major revenue sources of the general fund are property taxes, sales taxes, and utility tax/franchise fees. Also, beginning fund balance is about 21%, and other is pretty much everything else. Interest earnings, development fees, just everything else you could think of is in the other category. There are a lot of smaller amounts, but they add up to 24%. So here are the expenditures by general fund department. You can see the various departments listed there, starting with, it's in alphabetical order, so city council comes first, then development services, then finance, fire, emergency services is really part of fire, general government. I broke up parks and rec just to, just to demonstrate that it's a new area that's being added into the general fund. So you can just visualize that a little bit easier. Let's see what else is there. So what are the major things? You might see some spikes like in general government in 25, but it goes down in 26. That's because, the City Hall roof project is part of that. For example, there might be capital projects that are in these funds. And like I said, repairs and replacements, like, it's not, like a replacement to a roof. It's not like a brand new facility, but it's a repair and replacement. They end up in these funds as opposed to the capital project funds. So that's that. Question?
Councilmember Hoffmeyer's got a question.
Couple quick points on here. The recreation, why is that 700,000 more in 25 than 26?
Oh, that's because of a grant.
Okay.
There's expenses and revenues both related to that grant. I'm looking it up right now. What is that grant? Let's see. 450,000. Oh, parking lot, senior center parking lot. So there's a grant in there for that.
Gotcha.
And there's another 200,000 grant. Oh, the what do you call it? That study. The earmark that we, the 194,000 earmark.
I was wondering if that was in there.
Yeah,
That was
that's
one
in
of the
for
things I was
25.
wondering. And then that's a good segue into finance. A little bit of an increase there, but I mean that's how life goes.
Oh, it's that new position that we added.
Well, that's what I was going to
On
ask.
the new position chart, there was a new grants and performance analyst that were
Perfect,
added.
okay.
But these are only the expenses. There's actually projected revenues that will help cover half those costs.
Because originally, the grants administrator position, we were looking at that as kind of termed. Are we making that permanent?
That's continuing as well. This would be
Perfect.
a second position to further enhance our activities when it comes to lobbying and grants and so on.
We have to keep getting our grants to make any of this happen, so that's
Oh,
very
yeah, no, I
good.
totally agree.
And then the mayor and executive admin, I mean, that line's more stable than I thought it would be, so good job there on all of that. And, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this slide, or? Alrighty. So here's the general fund. This shows you the actuals from 2023, the budget amount from 24. We don't have the actuals for 24, obviously, because we have to end the year first. And then we have the next 2 years, 25 and 26. So you'll see the beginning fund balance, the top left number on the screen was about $2 million. And then when it was all said and done, we ended up with $5.3 million at the end of 23. So of course, that same number is the beginning balance, and then As far as the budget goes, the budget was anticipated to use fund balance for '24, but it looks like, and of course, this is a projection, but we're far enough along into the year to have a lot of confidence in this projection that we're going to end up with an additional, I think, about 3 million more. So instead of going down, we're going to end up going up by 3 million. So, well, we should end up by about $8.172 million at the end of '24. And then you'll see that, that's the beginning number again for '25. And then it looks like we'll be using about 2.265 million in '25. I forgot exactly how much, but about half of that, or a little less than half of that, is what we call carry forward projects. These are projects that are in the budget for '24, but they won't be finished in '24. So those expenses won't occur in '24. That's part of the reason why we're increasing our fund balance in '24. And the projects instead will be done in '25. Therefore, that part of that use of 2.265 million is actually from just carrying forward money from '24 to '25. But that's how we have to show it. Also, we have new capital projects to the tune of about $1.45 million in the general fund. Most of those projects are the roofs, the police station roof and the city hall roof. Also, there's 2 new vehicles for the police department, and there's some just rejuvenation of, I think, some flooring and some other activities as well in the police department, and some stuff in fire as well and other departments.
And David, once again, those interfund charges going from the 1.7, 2.1 to the 3.6, that's a matter of that 504
Yeah.
contribution from the general fund.
833,000 of the total amount going into the fund. 800 that new the facility and infrastructure repair for replacement fund. 833,000 of it is coming from the general fund. So that's part of the reason for the increase.
And explain the debt to me. We had debt in 2023, none in 2024, and then back in 2025.
Well, the '24 number is a budget number. We will have debt by the end, when the actuals go through, we will have debt because of the excess levy to build the fire station. We have debt coming in from property taxes that goes directly to pay off the bond that we took out to build the fire station and to buy the Quint ladder truck. So it'll be about $679 or so thousand dollars in '24 when we have the actuals to show you. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, guys, we're only halfway through this, so do you want a quick 10-minute break and then reconvene? Yeah, 10-minute break. Okay, so we're going to break for 10 minutes, be back at 3:19.
Okay.
David, Chief Slowick and Chief Anderson. Ari? I know. All right, it's 3:19. It's been 10 minutes. If we could bring everyone back in. Missing Councilmember Arms. All right, David, you got the floor.
Yay. All right. Oh, what's up? Yeah, I need over there. All right, so the general fund in '25 will be at the end of the year 5.9. It's budgeted to be $5.9 million in the budgeted fund balance, and then in '26 there's programmed in the use of about $939,000, and we'll end with about $5 million of fund balance by the end of '26. So over the 4 years, we started out with about $2 million, and we're going to end with $5 million for the that's the unencumbered fund balance.
And David, just real quick, like that roughly, well, it looks like $1 million increase from 23 and a $5 million increase from 24 in the revenues.
Yeah, that's when we put the budget together for 23 and 24. It was before the vote on the levy lid lift and the excess levy. So that's why the revenues that 24 is a budgeted number, not an actual number. So that obviously the revenues will be much higher. It'll be closer aligned to 23 when it's all said and done at the end of 20. When we do our calculations at the end of the year. All right.
And that's where your estimated additional ending fund balance figures coming from, right? That you're expecting those revenues to be higher, or is that above and beyond?
Yeah, I looked at both revenues and expenses. So some of our expenses were a little bit, better than budget, and our revenues there are also a bit better than budget. Also, our interest earnings are also very good compared to the original budget as well. So those are up as well. General fund. So basically, the overview of the reason for the change between 24 and 25. We have bargaining agreements. We have the non-represented cost of living increases that I talked about. Recreation is now in the general fund as opposed to being a separate fund, and the personnel requests that I went over earlier. For the operations and the internal services, it's the facility and infrastructure replacement reserve. For capital projects, you have a split between the amounts that's being carried forward from 2024 and new capital projects like the police and city hall roof, new patrol cars, et cetera, and also a small amount for decision packages. So for the streets fund, we started out with a negative fund balance, but all that means is the fund balance had dipped into the operating reserve, which is the 2 months of operating reserve that we have for our governmental funds. By the end of the year, we're looking at an estimated fund balance of $530,000. However, just based on the amount of projects that we have and the amount of revenues that are coming in for streets, it looks like we're going to be pretty much tapped out of unencumbered fund balance by the end of the biennial, which is why I discussed earlier about the issue with transportation funding Washington statewide, and us bringing some revenue options to council to consider next year for transportation and streets funding. The Creative Arts Fund is located here. Beginning fund balance starts at $231,000. It's projected to end at about $236,000. It's just a pretty much standard amounts that were budgeted in here. There is a transfer of about $15,000 to general fund recreation to support recreational activities as well. This is the LTAC, or the Civic Improvement Lodging Tax 2% Fund. The amount of expenses that I included in here, I included $450,000 of expenses to match what the City Council had approved for the LTAC to utilize during the LTAC process this year. And for 26, I just used the same amount. Obviously, depending on what the City Council approves, that could go up or down. And you can see that the ending fund balance after the end of '26 is just under 500,000. Here is the water fund. This is the unencumbered fund balance. There is a reserve that's not included in this and other dollar amounts that are not included in these numbers. But you can see that as we do our interfund transfers to the facility reserve for replacement fund and also the transfers to do the catch-up contributions, the unencumbered fund balance does decrease, but it's really just a shifting of the money to that fund. However, I did mention earlier that our operational cost is increasing, with Anacortes raising their water rates by about $500,000, which is estimated for '25 and '26. Also included in here are some capital projects that don't fall into the capital outlay portion of the budget, but fall into the operating portion of the budget as well. Here's our wastewater fund. Revenues decreased due to the 19% reduction in wastewater rates. We have those interfund charges that we talked about earlier, and we also have the transfer for the catch-up contributions for the facility reserve. Solid waste does not have anything that goes into the facility reserve. The increases here are mostly due to the vehicle and equipment reserve for replacement and some other types of interfund charges, such as from engineering or from the general fund. But also, I did talk about how our tipping fees are going up by 22%. The 20% is reflected in the budget here, and that'll be going up slightly to 22% by the time the October budget gets released. You can see that we're not going to have a whole lot of unencumbered fund balance by the end of the 2-year period, which is why we'll be bringing rate adjustments to City Council to evaluate next year. Storm drain starts off with about $472,000 of fund balance. It'll end with about $720,000. It does include some increases for those interfund facility charges and also the catch-up contributions as well, and some capital projects. The Marina Fund, based on what I talked about earlier, the $400,000 a year going to the reserve for the dredging and those other projects that were discussed, the Marina Fund will be close to zero when it comes to unencumbered fund balance by the end of 2026 per the budget. Vehicle Repair Fund, this is the first internal service fund. This fund is not really meant to have a large fund balance because it charges out all of its activities to all of the user departments, which are located throughout all the funds. So you can just see, the revenues are basically charges out, which match the expenses here. So that's why you'll see it pretty much on target every time. The Equipment Replacement Fund, this is a reserve for replacement for equipment. This large amount in 2025 just happens to be a year where we have a lot of vehicle replacements. In '26, we have less vehicle replacements. The money comes in based on the life of the vehicle and the estimated replacement cost at the time on the chart when we're anticipating having to replace that vehicle. This is that Facility and Infrastructure Replacement Fund. Its fund balance is increasing over time, and we do have a project that it'll be transferring out funding to the project fund in 2026. Forgot exactly the name of the project, but it's in the backup in the project area. This is the Technology Replacement Fund. This deals with hardware and software technology replacements. This pretty much charges out to the user departments what it spends. So that's why the fund balance pretty much stays the same over the years. And the Shop Facility Fund houses most of Public Works, well, most of the non-utility portion of Public Works and also engineering. The fund balance varies over time. It also depends on what projects were being performed by engineering and by other departments that are located in here, like the shop. To see it just varies over time, and the fund balance will be going to $338,000 by the end of the 2-year period, from the $180,000 it began with in 2023. And finally, here's the long-term capital improvement plan. For the biennial period of 25-26, there's $63.6 million programmed in to the plan. Over the 6 years, that would be $130 million. The capital projects are divided up by area. You have the general fund encompassing about a quarter of the projects. Other governmental funds, like the streets fund, is about 18%. The marina fund is the largest piece of the pie at 31%. It's unusual, but it's only because the marina fund has those two large projects beginning in 26, the dredging and the breakwater. And you can see the other funds or other areas of the city are located here as well. And here are the funding sources for the long-term capital plan for the 2 years. About 25% is new funding coming from our various funds, general fund, streets fund, internal service funds, or, enterprise funds. About 29% are carry forward money, which is basically money that is in the current 24 budget, and the projects won't be completed in 24. So that funding is projected to carry forward into 25 and 26. And the remainder of it are either secured or unsecured grants or future debt. So to reiterate, the budget meetings and hearings, the next meeting to discuss the budget will be on October 23rd, 2024. That'll be the mayor's proposed budget. Then we'll have public hearings for the 1% property tax and the proposed budget on November 5th. And our final public hearing for the adopted budget on November 19th. And anybody watching, or any citizens or residents who want to comment on the budget or make comments about anything city-related at all, you can go to our website, oakharbor.gov/public comment. And in order to ensure that I get any feedback into the budget for October 23rd, if I could have your questions or feedback in the next 2 weeks, that way it would give us time to do all the spreadsheets and reprogramming that we need to do in order to make sure the budget's created in time for everybody. So with that concludes the presentation.
All right, here we go. Who's first? Yes, Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, David. So just for your feedback, so I'm clear on what you're expecting feedback from, outside of some of the changes we've made internally, such as some of these internal fund transfers and stuff, right, which is a change. The vast majority of this budget is, like you say, is performance-based, right? It's based upon the needs of each of these departments, how each of these departments have dealt with their funds in the past, and et cetera. But you are looking for some input on us, I take it, on the decision package, right? I mean, because decision package is decision package, right? And just for the people out there listening, I mean, it's about $175,000 worth of smaller items, but they are decision package items, so I assume you're looking for feedback from us on those?
Sure. Feedback on any part of the budget you have.
And then obviously we've got some position change summaries, which total about $587,000 in the first year that I'm.
Plus the one-time cost of $50,000.
Plus the one-time cost of $53,000. So I assume you're looking for some feedback specifically on those items?
I mean, we're looking for feedback on any questions you have or any feedback you want to give, including those items. So it's, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
Come up with something. Oh, something. So I will just say my initial thoughts are, I appreciate the fact that we are starting to put money away for long-term maintenance of our facilities. I think that's a very solid move. I like the idea of future capital projects, making sure that we are including all of our maintenance and operation costs and future replacement costs in figuring out those items as well. I also like the cost recovery idea of, you know, providing services for special events and some of the organizations, that we spend a fair amount of time with police and fire and streets, and so being able to recover some of our costs on that, I think is a good path forward. Initially, I do have some concern with how much we are kind of upside down in the recreation side of things. I have faith in our director and know that, he was very clear initially that it's going to take about 2 years. And so, I want to support him in that 2-year endeavor. But where we're seeing the numbers compared to what we were presented a year ago is there's a bit of a contrast there. In the June workshop last year, we were estimating supplies and materials at about $15,000. I don't know what the actual cost of supplies and materials were, but if we're that far upside down, I can only assume that it was significantly more than that. We were projecting program activity revenues of $167,591, which is what we need to break even. After full phase in programs, at a minimum enrollment, we would generate $82,277, and if programs didn't meet minimum enrollment, then we would cancel the programs and not incur any costs. It doesn't appear as if we've kind of followed that process, and so we have a long ways to go in order to break even. And so I have some concern that are we going to be able to meet those initial expectations that were presented to us. So.
Yeah, I can speak to that real quick. So you'll see, we're showing you now in the administrative reports details on the programs. You'll see some examples where when we first offered a class, maybe we have below the minimum enrollment we wanted for that class, but we went ahead and held the class because we knew that would encourage additional enrollment for someone that enjoyed the class and wanted to keep it going. And we saw that actually flush out in the summer programs after we had low enrollment in the very first one, and then an exponentially larger enrollment the next time we held that class, to where we were hitting that break-even point. Something also to consider with this that's not included yet in here is that we are working on an updated fee schedule that will adjust our revenues for recreational facility uses a little more closer to where market needs to be. So that'll be an additional revenue source there also. We also, like I said, we're just now into our second season with programming. And so as we go along, we'll be starting some of those more revenue-heavy types of programs, like I mentioned, like camps and leagues and things like that.
Okay, sounds good. I mentioned it before, and I'll just mention it again. Smith Park right now is not a priority for me, and I know that's in our 2025 projects, but I think that perhaps that REAP money could be used towards something else. At this particular, I know the skate park is one that is scheduled for REAP in a few years, and that seems to have a lot of traction right now. They're excited about that, and there's some work that's being done, and so perhaps we flip-flop those in the timeline a little bit or something. But other than that, that's pretty much I've got. There's a lot to go over there, and so David, I'll be providing some thoughts over the next couple of weeks. Yep. So thank you.
That's it. That's all I got right now. Councilmember Arms.
I just want to say, Brian, thank you. And, starting off with all these projects and with everything that you're planning to do, we have the pamphlets out. I think people are becoming more aware that we're more active, that we're doing things, and I think that encourages the community to participate more. I think it was just kind of that place that nobody knew what was going on, and now we see it being more active. And I notice when I'm down there that there is more people. So I think people are beginning to look at the programs, and they're getting to look at all these things, and I think hopefully that will, be part of what's going to bump the revenue up, and thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Arms. Anyone else for the good of the order? No? All right, hearing nothing, we will move on. Thank you very much, David. And we will go on to our city administrator report, and here to present is our city administrator, Sabrina Combs.
Mayor, we didn't have that on there this month. Sorry, I just noticed on the agenda. It wasn't listed because staff has been focused on doing budgeting. So, yeah, sorry.
Okay, it's on my, sorry, I'm just reading here. So, all right, well, I will move on to city council comments then. How about any city council comments in general that want to be shared? Councilmember Arms.
I just want to say that we had an awesome 50th anniversary down for the marina. We had a lot of people that don't have boats. A lot of people were new to the city, and it was like a mob scene down there. People from one end to another. It went really well. Thank you, Brian, for helping with all that, and everybody that participated. It brought a lot of people to, oh, we have a marina, and that brought a lot of that to there. So thank you again for that. That was really awesome.
I would like to echo that sentiment. Brian, your team did an amazing job on Saturday. It was a lot of fun to be out there and working with them and grilling hot dogs and serving that up to the community. So that was a great time, and I think it brought a lot of awareness to the marina as well. So our open house was obviously successful as well. We had a lot of participation that evening, and I anticipate that we'll have just as much at the next one. I'm already getting a lot of inquiries about that. So all of the directors and staff, under all of the directors, I just want to say again, thank you, a huge thank you to all of you for all of your hard work through this budget process. It's been a lot this year because we are going to this program performance budgeting. However, this will allow us to be more precise and intentional with available funds. So it's going to yield huge results as we go forward, as well as the replacement funds and the things that we're putting away now. I say this over and over again. It's going to be tough for us in these years, but whoever takes this on in the next 4 or 8 years is going to be very grateful that we did this and this was the hard work. So thank you very much. And with that, we are adjourned at 3:42.